the idea with today's topic is really to talk about the future of work and also the role that entrepreneurship might have in your life, in your career. My name is, as mentioned, my name is Jean-Luc. Today I work at Khalifa Innovation Center, and that is basically a center where we work with what's called deep tech startups, and that is startups that are deeply rooted in research, where usually there's a strong intellectual property attached to what the entrepreneurs do. And basically, I guide them. We run programs. We do coaching. We help them also with fundraising. Before joining, I joined at the beginning of the year. Before that, I was running my own business for 5 years, and I'm still running that business to a certain extent. And that means that when I talk about entrepreneurship, it's not only theoretical. It's actually things I've lived myself, experienced myself. I've worked a lot with entrepreneurs from all around the world. I also worked a lot with corporate innovation. And this is really my passion. And that's also one of the reasons why I'd like to share that knowledge with you. And one more reason why this is such an interesting topic, I hope and I believe, and that is because nowadays, I think a lot of young people, when they start their studies or when they do their studies, they're asking themselves a lot of questions about the future. What will my future look like? And what is it actually, what is the direction I should give to my life? I should give to my career? We hear a lot about startups. We hear a lot of entrepreneurship. Is that the right thing for me? As there other paths? And what is the type of work I will really be interested in going forward, and what can I expect from an employer? So to deal with some of these things, it's really something that a lot of people go through their head and need advice, need guidance, but sometimes they also need to be better equipped to start thinking about this properly. So what I'd like to do throughout this presentation is give you some thoughts and reflections on different directions the world is taking, but also maybe help you think how you can stay relevant in that world and also find your path ultimately. So the very first thing I'd like to talk about is what I call the speed of change. I guess you're all familiar with this, that things around us are accelerating. They're constantly accelerating. And what I mean with that is that nowadays, everything's connected, right? We wake up in the morning, we take our mobile phone, and basically the information I get to read is the same or similar to what somebody at the other end of the world gets to see at the same time. So information spreads really, really fast. Knowledge spreads fast. Digital has changed everything. Digital has changed the way we think. We get influenced a lot through social media, but digital has also enabled us to innovate. It is cheaper and easier than ever before to innovate, to build mobile applications, to build new companies. And nowadays, if you want to develop, let's say, a new application, if you want to innovate, you don't even need to code anymore. There's actually platforms that can help you with that. So everything is accelerating. If you think about, for instance, the time it takes to build, what we call a unicorn business, that is a business that is worth more than $1 billion. That is something that might have taken 10 years or 15 years or longer in the past. These are things that now accelerate and basically can happen pretty much not overnight, but within a year. Sometimes we see these companies emerging out of nowhere and growing at a tremendous speed. So the growth we see as well is also an indicator of that speed of change that is happening. If we look at applications that you're using, that everybody's using, like WhatsApp, for instance, just to give you an idea, I mean, it grew to 2 billion users within less than 10 years. And now other applications are growing even faster. If you look at things like TikTok, it took even less to grow. So everything is accelerating. Everything is going faster and faster. And that means that it then becomes a bit difficult to think about, okay, what does that mean for me? And also, why is this happening? So one of the reasons why we see this acceleration also is because of all these emerging technologies. So artificial intelligence, for instance, blockchain, cloud, IoT, robotics, all of these technologies are nowadays converging also and allowing people to innovate really, really fast. And also these innovations can then also spread much, much faster as what they did in the past. So if we start from there, we can start thinking, okay, what could the future look like? So one of the things to think about is, how will work look like and how will work evolve? So first thing I'd like to define a little bit is, what is work really? Work from a business perspective is very much about outcomes, generating revenue. For an individual, there's also expectations. So the outcomes, let's say for an individual, is very much on, getting a salary, right? How can I make money? How can I make money to survive? You could say initially, some of these things, if we look at Maslow's pyramid, the needs are very much at the lower part of the pyramid, but as our world evolves, our needs are evolving as well. So for instance, all of these businesses are changing through technology, through speeds of change. And what we had in the past, or what we had, let's say, if I would ask anybody, or would ever ask anybody, 15 or 20 years ago, how would they describe work, or what is it that matters when it comes to work? Most people probably would have said job safety. And the relationship with the employer was very much that of, a contract that you expect almost to be for life. Right? So maybe this is like 20, 30 years ago. People were expecting to work for one and the same company for life, to climb the ladder in that company. And most of the times, businesses had a certain business model, a certain value proposition, and a lot of the focus was on efficiency. But all of this is changing. All of this is changing because of technology. Now, what we see happening, and some of these things have now been accelerated by the pandemic as well, is that businesses need to reinvent themselves. We have seen companies collapse, companies like Kodak, companies like Blockbuster and others that were, dominating in their field. They just died out because they didn't adjust their business models. So what we start seeing is more and more companies start to shift and focus on value, and basically they need to innovate in their business models. So they use digital to innovate. They use digital to come up with new business models. Digital has also enabled platforms. Digital has enabled collaboration platforms. Digital has enabled remote work, right? We are using Zoom now. We could be using MS Teams or other platforms. There's plenty of tools that allow us to work more efficiently, but that has also started to change our relationship with employers. What does that mean? It means that we, as an individual, we realize, I don't need to move to find a new job. I might be able to work remotely, or I might even decide to take smaller projects. This is really what we start seeing with what's called the gig economy. The gig economy is really about all these workers that don't have a permanent employment anymore, but basically are paid based on the work they provide. So for instance, if you look at an Uber driver, they're not employed by Uber. They make as much money as they're willing to drive. Because of all of this, people also realize, work-life balance actually matters much more. And I can start defining a bit how I want to work. So, digital has enabled us to start thinking about working remotely. It has allowed us to work from anywhere. This has been accelerated by the pandemic, and more people now want to find that ideal, place where they can work a bit on their own terms. And I think that this is something that we will see accelerating in the future. So one of the things that you will see also is that, especially with what's happening around us with climate change and some of the other societal challenges we have, people are more and more looking to work for companies that inspire them, but not only inspires them, companies that stands for their values. So for instance, if we look at younger generations, most of you are probably much more focused on sustainability, on making sure that our planet turns into something better than it is today. So purpose is becoming increasingly important for individuals, but also for companies. And this is where some of the leaders, I would say entrepreneurial leaders, are really introducing what's called massive transformational purposes. Massive transformational purposes is really when your business focuses not only on selling a product, but focuses on trying to do something good for the planet, for society. And then basically suddenly you start seeing the purpose of the company and of the individual being more and more aligned. And I think hopefully this is the direction that work will take in the future. At least it's one of the scenarios. It's one of the scenarios that I personally believe in. Now, just to give you a better understanding on the impact technology is having. So this is not, I shared with you now a bit the vision about how work could evolve. But if we look at some examples, for instance, this is an Amazon warehouse. Amazon is, one of the largest or the largest e-commerce provider. And when we look at, the value chain of e-commerce, there has been a lot of work, manual work being done in the past, with especially in the supply chain and logistics. But when you look at their warehouses now, they're using more and more robots that are able to, scan the codes on the packages, pick them up, move them to the right place. They have actually acquired a robotic startup 7 or 8 years ago for about $1 billion. And now most of their warehouses are completely automated. And that means that a lot of this manual work that was being done in the warehouse is now being replaced. So as you can see, things that are manual, things that are tedious, are very likely to be replaced and automated. To give you another example, I mean, staying with Amazon, you might or might not have read or heard about this, but this is another example of how different technologies can be used to create convenience, to create new values. So Amazon Go is a shop that is completely unmanned. Basically, the way it works is that you have your mobile app where you create your Amazon account. You have your digital wallet. As soon as you enter the shop, you scan your phone or at the entry, and basically the shop knows you're inside. And when you pick up goods in the shop, it creates a virtual shopping basket and tracks everything you put in your basket and take out of your basket. At the end, you can exit the shop without paying. The money is automatically deducted from your account. This is only possible because a lot of technologies are converging. It uses IoT sensors to look at the products. It looks at the image recognition on the cameras to ensure that what is accounted for in the basket is right. It uses artificial intelligence. All of these technologies are converging and allow us to create completely new experiences, but allow us also to automate things completely. So here, you don't need a cashier anymore. And again, a cashier is the type of work that is very repetitive. It doesn't require high level of cognitive skills. It requires just basic cognitive skills. And that means it's a good candidate to be automated. Going a bit further, you probably all know about Tesla cars. I mean, Tesla has been the first company to introduce fully electric cars. They solved the problem with the charging stations, but they're also the company that is the most aggressive about autonomous driving. And as we speak, over the last year and a half, or a little bit over a year, they have been testing or experimenting with fully self-driving cars. And that means cars where you don't need to hold the steering wheel anymore, where basically you could at one point even remove the steering wheel from the car completely. Now, Elon Musk, the founder and CEO of Tesla, also made an announcement at that time. He said that within a year, so probably sometime early next year, they will launch robo-taxis. And that means that the car that you have today, the Tesla car, could be turned into a taxi, so it could be turned into an Uber, with the difference that there's not going to be any driver required anymore. Now, it might take a few years until that takes off, but just think about it. Uber drivers might disappear completely. In a similar way, types of works or some of the work that we have seen in warehouses might disappear completely. So this is really, giving you some ideas on where we're heading when it comes to the future. And that future is approaching probably much faster than what we think. If you live in UAE, you probably have and went into some of the government stores. I think in Diwa they have these. This is the Pepper robot. This is a robot that has been developed by SoftBank. And the idea with this type of robot, so it has some basic voice recognition and some basic AI capabilities. The idea with this robot is that it's used in customer care centers to route the clients to the right customer care agent. Now, what is very interesting is that it has been designed in such a way so that it looks more like a child, so it doesn't scare people. But when you look at the type of services that will be provided by robots, they're getting more and more advanced, from providing simple information to being able to guide you in more and more complex problems. And this is really also where today in society there's a bit of a fear of how far is this going to go? How far are robots going to evolve? Are they going to take our jobs? And I think the reality is that it's not the case. I mean, there's a lot of I would say wrongful information also found in the press. I mean, the other day I read about Sophia as a robot that you probably heard about. That Sophia as a robot wants to create the family and have a baby, and this is all nonsense. It's just the marketing. The reality is that robots they're optimized to perform certain types of tasks. They learn how to do certain types of tasks, but they don't have any self-awareness, they don't have a will, or so on. So we don't really need to be afraid of that. We just need to understand a bit how robotics is going to impact our lives. There's actually a very interesting study that was done by McKinsey a couple of years ago. McKinsey is one of these large consulting firms, which you also might want to work for maybe in the future if you decide to become a consultant. But basically what they have done is that they looked at different job categories and then looked at what are the type of jobs that basically might disappear. What are the jobs that could be completely automated? And what are the jobs which have a very low risk of being automated because they require skill sets, they require knowledge that AI will not be able to replace. So when we look at that, I mean, overall, they discovered that basically 60% of occupations have at least 30% of their activities that can be automated. What that means is that automation and AI and robotics will have an impact on the majority of professions. Some of them, like as we see here on the top of the chart, sewing machine operators, sorting of agricultural products, these are things which are very manual type of activities. They don't require a lot of high-level cognitive skills, and these type of jobs might disappear completely. While other jobs are very difficult to automate, like for instance, if you're psychiatrist or legislator, these jobs are very likely not affected at all or very, very little. So this is something to keep in mind. Most jobs will be impacted to a certain extent, but it's mostly the manual type of work, the tedious work, the work we don't want to do anyway, that is likely to be automated. Another way to look at this is also that when we look at the workforce, there's going to be a shift in the type of skills that companies will be looking for. So we will see overall a decrease in jobs that require physical and manual work or basic cognitive skills. What we mean with basic cognitive skills is basically somebody just entering data that, when you go to the bank and you provide them all information and they just write it down, that's a basic cognitive skill. It doesn't require a lot of analysis or intelligence. So these type of jobs will go down. On the other hand, when we look at higher cognitive skills, which require creativity, more complex information processing, these will actually grow. And of course, since technology is becoming increasingly important, we will also see a massive increase in demand when it comes to technical job, to technical skills, whether it's developers, whether it's cybersecurity experts, whether it's data scientists. All of these are skills that will become increasingly important. But not only that, there's also, you could say, new type of leadership skills that will be needed. So when we look at social and emotional, the leadership skills required to manage people, for instance, in a distributed environment, they're very different than the ones that you need when you work in a factory and you supervise everybody. So there's more autonomy that you will see, and leaders will need more emotional skills to manage employees. And also entrepreneurship is going to be increasingly important, not only for people running startups, but also within companies. So if we look at this, acceleration that will be provided by AI, you can see this. It's not only localized to, let's say, to the US. So this is what this picture is trying to show here, is that the type of impact and type of changes we see it is kind of similar in many parts of the world, where there's going to be a lowering of these basic cognitive skills and physical work, and increase in demand for technology jobs, and also for people with strong social and emotional skills. These are really the things to keep in mind when we look at how things are accelerating, how the speed of change is going to impact also the skills that we need. Another thing or another word that you will hear a lot. So, and this is a bit, again, it's related to the speed of change. Speed of change basically means that things are not as stable as they were before, right? What you knew maybe yesterday is maybe of no value tomorrow. So there's a certain sense of volatility. Volatility means that things can change very rapidly. Again, talking at the speed of change, a company, a unicorn, might appear in a year or two, increase in valuation very quickly, but then somebody else might come with something better, and the company might, crash as quickly as it grew. So that's what we mean with volatility. Because we have all these technologies, because we have all these changes, there's also a certain level of uncertainty. So, and this is also important for you to think about. When we think about the future, there's not one future. There's many possible futures, and there's many possible scenarios. And this is something we have seen as well with the pandemic now, right? We expected things to go a certain way, and then we were thrown into a completely new scenario. So there's also something to keep in mind. There's scenarios which are more likely, but there's a certain level of uncertainty in everything we do. It's also complexity. Because there's so many moving parts, it means also that the world is becoming more complex. And because the world is becoming more complex, we also need to learn how to deal with ambiguity. What does that mean? Is that in the past, let's say as a leader, when you wanted to take a decision, you wanted to know A, B, C, D. And if all are aligned, then okay, I move forward. But maybe today what you have is more a world where, okay, I'm 70% sure about A, maybe 50 about C. And then I still need to take a decision. So today we have a bit more ambiguity that we need to deal with. And that means that leaders need to take take decisions based on the information they have, and that information might not always be complete. What we need to think about also is that in that type of world, we also need new types of skills, and if we look at leadership skills, for instance, what is becoming increasingly important is what's called emotional and political intelligence. So in the past, it was very much a word of command and control. Now you need more and more to get buy-in of other people, rally people around you, convince others. And that requires more understanding of the other person's, situation. That's more the emotional intelligence and the political intelligence. Everybody also needs to become more tech savvy. And this is important because with the speed of change also, what you will see is that companies are looking for people that can be operational right away. And that means that companies might invest less in on-the-job training, and that they expect some of these things to already happen before they hire. And that's particularly true for some of the collaboration tools and efficiency tools. So they expect people that are on top of that game already. Of course, we expect more and more remote working. But one of the things we have seen during the pandemic is that most companies don't know how to deal with remote work. Most people end up working more because leaders are not trained to deal with asynchronous collaboration. Asynchronous collaboration is pretty much where everybody works at their own pace, but you still have the tools to get the right information, and you set up your face-to-face meetings only when you need. But what happened is that a lot of people, a lot of managers were dealing with their employees only in a synchronous fashion, and that meant a lot of meetings, a lot of extra work. Because of the speed of change, we also need to adapt faster. And that in itself means that we need to have that or develop a learning mindset. We need to constantly learn, constantly develop ourselves. Because of the uncertainty, some of the things we will try will fail. So we need resilience. We need to know, okay, this didn't work out, or this job didn't end up well. I need to try something else. In the startup world, we often refer to this as fail fast and learn faster. Other skills that will be increasingly important is creativity and innovation. These are often coupled also to the entrepreneurial spirit. And then, of course, if we work more and more remotely, it also means that we need to become better communicators. We need to become more efficient at collaborating and at sharing information in very effective way, even when that communication is virtual. So just to go back now, all of this change is happening. One of the things I mentioned in terms of how work is changing, and this is in a sense going toward the path toward entrepreneurship, if you want. The first thing we have seen is a gig economy. Now, the gig economy, if you want, it's very much about these Uber drivers, right? So we have the sharing economy, which is about reusing assets. The gig economy is about, taking work here and there, basically just as an add-on to your salary, or even if you do enough of that, it could be a full-time job. So we have Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, Grab, and so on. They're all part of the gig economy. But that is something which has evolved. It's not only these simple work, which is driving or delivery, it has also evolved to many other areas. So if you look at Udemy, for instance, it's like gig work as well, where you teach and you provide your teachings online. If you live in UAE, you might know Mr. Usta. Mr. Usta is a platform for handyman. So if you're a plumber, if you're a carpenter, and if you're looking for jobs, you can use a platform like Mr. Usta. You don't need to have a permanent employment. You can just go through these platforms, which basically broker you to your next job. You even find it for designers. So 99 Design or Fever are these platforms where more and more creatives get that provide creative artwork. These can be everything from logo design to PowerPoint template to industrial designers. This is part of the gig economy. People that want to live on their own terms, that don't want to be employed, and that are willing to give a share of their salary to these platform providers just to get that freedom to work on their own terms. Now, question is, what's next? My personal belief is that this will further evolve, where we are moving even higher up in terms of the value we can deliver. So, if you look at the drivers, the value is not that high, especially if you consider that, maybe some of these things will be automated. Then you move up with works that requires more cognitive skills. And now, and later you will move up even more, where you create, for instance, you could have a consulting firm, which is completely virtual, and people distributed all around the world, collaborating, providing services to a larger corporate. These would be all people working on their own terms, having developed a trust network, and that basically decide to engage with larger companies. Interestingly, if you look at different generations, 63% of millennials are willing to go for this hawk on-demand type of gig work. So 63% of millennials are not really decided to go for a full-time job. They're open to this, and I think that will further increase. Compared to my generation, it's probably more between 30 and 40% that are willing to do that. So we see a rapid change in mindsets and people willing to work on different terms. Now, if you think about that, if you think about how we are moving toward the gig economy, how maybe employers are not necessarily that loyal to the employees and vice versa also, why not start thinking about entrepreneurship? Being a gig worker or moving toward being an entrepreneur and founding a startup, it's not that big a step anymore. So this is also something to think about. And when I created my business, I can tell you, in the first 2 years, I learned as much as I learned in the 10 years I did before. Because when you create your own business, when you set up a startup or any business for that matter, it requires you to work across many, many disciplines. It requires you to develop certain type of skill set. It requires you to develop certain type of habits as well. So if you are, considering, entrepreneurship as a path, these are some of the things that are very important if you want to be successful. So one is you have to be fierce. Fierce meaning that there's going to be a lot of people telling you, oh, this will fail, this is not going to work. You still need to continue. You need to be committed as well. And committed means if I want to be an entrepreneur, it's not the side activity I do between lunch and dinner, half an hour here, half an hour there. You really need to dedicate enough time to this to give any of your ideas a chance to actually succeed. If you're not committed enough, it will not work. Now, what is interesting is that when people think about entrepreneurship, they might actually be in a job. It doesn't mean you need to quit your job right away. You could actually, if you have enough commitment, start developing your ideas on the side. Other things which are important is self-awareness. Self-awareness because you need to understand your limits. You need to understand what you're good at, what you're not so good at. You also need to develop resilience. And with that, I mean that, sometimes you will fail. You need to know how to get back up, how to continue, how to start over. So becoming an entrepreneur requires a lot of personal development. It's not only about the idea, it's also about you as a person and how you're going to grow, how you're going to develop. So personally, it's something I would recommend to everybody to do at least once in their life. Even if your idea fails, you'll still learn a lot in the process. What is interesting also when we look at the future of society and when we look at our world and how it's evolving, I think the ones that are shaping our future, it's not governments, it's not politicians, it's more and more entrepreneurs. Let's say governments are enablers. They help us realize the visions, but the one that more and more shape these visions are entrepreneurs. So if you look at the ones that probably is mostly the ones that has been providing convenience. When we talk about Uber or Careem or Zomato or Deliveroo, these are all these startups that basically today have shaped our lives in the sense that they provided a lot of convenience. A lot of things are simpler and easier for us. If you decide to go into entrepreneurship, you need to think about, okay, what is it that I can do? What are the problems that are worthwhile solving? So right now, what we have seen is a lot of first generation of digital entrepreneurs. The first one being the kind of the convenience providers, the e-commerce providers, the Amazons, the Souk. The second one is the ones that have developed the sharing economies. These are the Ubers, the Airbnb. If you look at what's happening around us, now a lot of people are reflecting about the economy. Can we develop a new type of economy? So a lot of work happening in the what we call the cryptos, decentralized finances, and so on. And then there's also, I think, the ones that have an even bigger purpose. This is what we call massive transformational purpose, which is about life enhancements, is about climate change, is about all these things that will impact our life and society at the global scale. And just to give you an example, I mean, if you think about these people that will change the world, I think one we cannot really neglect is Elon Musk. And the reason is that these type of persons are visionary, and they don't just want to make money, they want to change the world. So if we look at Tesla, for instance, Tesla didn't follow the same path as other car manufacturers, which were building hybrid cars. They were building electric cars from day one, despite everybody was saying, but there's no batteries that are good enough, there's no charging stations. Well, they built that, they developed that. That was part of the vision. Now the vision is to take us to space through SpaceX. Now the vision is to start developing or combining all that know-how about batteries, about autonomy, about AI, about energy to build bots, to build robots. And the next thing, if you look at Elon Musk, is to connect that with our brain to make the user interface even simpler as what we have today. So that's the Neuralink project. And if you look at these type of entrepreneurs, they're really visionary, and they're really trying to transform society. You can go into entrepreneurship without having these massive ideas, but these are the type of persons that inspire other entrepreneurs. So to conclude then, just to give you, I hope I give you a glimpse on where technology is going, how work is changing. A couple of things I'd like you to keep in mind. One is, when we look at the speed of change, when we look at VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, that really forces us to focus on new skill sets, right? That also means we need to continue developing learning mindsets. So new skill sets means more technology savvy, emotional intelligence, higher cognitive skills, creativity, innovation, and so on, but also continuous learning. Work and the relationship with the employer will change. It might turn into something which is less of a life contract as we had before, but something a bit more ad hoc, where purpose is aligned. Jobs overall most jobs will start to have an entrepreneurial dimension as well. And this is also something to consider, is the entrepreneurial side, and maybe going down that path early on to develop the right type of skills. At the end, what is really important is that in the past, we had a degree, and that degree would lead us to that industry or to that management consulting firms. Now we need to think a bit more. We need to take a future in our own hands. And that means you need to picture yourself in this world that will be changing in 5 years, in 10 years, and start building up the right type of skill sets and also the right type of habits, I think. And this is really how I want to conclude this presentation.